Hello and welcome to another video review. This is Section 8 for PC, Xbox 360, and PlayStation 3. This is a first-person shooter by Timegate Studios that was released in 2009 for PC and Xbox 360 and later on the following year for PS3. And yes, the PC version does use Games for Windows Live. Everybody hates Games for Windows Live, for good reason. It's terrible. But in this case, I haven't personally had any problems with it, except for a few errors here and there, but generally it's been smooth on my end. Now, I only paid $1 for this, and the only reason I did that was because it was on clearance where I got it. It was a brand new copy, but it was just on clearance where I got it for $1. So that should tell you something right off the bat about this game. And the fact that it uses Games for Windows Live should tell you something else. But the interesting thing about it is that the concept, you're playing in the far future, and you are running around in this suit of power armor that allows you to drop in from orbit at 15,000 feet. So it's an interesting concept, and it's a primarily multiplayer shooter. The problem I had with that was that nobody plays this online anymore. I mean literally nobody plays Section 8 online anymore. And so I couldn't actually play it online and ended up having to go with instant action in the campaign instead. So keep that in mind when I'm talking about this later on when I get to the gameplay and such. But the real question is, how does that really cool concept of dropping in from orbit and the power armor playing out and everything, how does that all work in game? And does it really propel this game forward, or does it hold it back, or what? But before I answer that question, I'm going to go over the presentation of this game. Now, the graphics are limited by the scope of this game. It has very, very big maps, which means that you're going to have to sacrifice visual quality for that quantity, particularly with it being a console co-release and having to deal with console hardware. But suffice to say, it looks pretty good for what it is, although if you compare it to other Unreal Engine 3 games, it looks fairly average to slightly dated. The modeling and animation are very well done. They're nice and smooth, and the modeling is very well detailed. There's lots of stuff in it. But the texture quality is just kind of average at best, and certain textures are kind of low res. Now again, that's mostly because the maps are so big. But they didn't really do anything to make everything pop out at you. There's no visuals in this game that really speak of the sci-fi elements of this thing, apart from the character modeling and, of course, the vehicles and such. But at the same time, they didn't do anything that was particularly bad with the graphics. It's just colorful enough to not look like every other FPS on the market right now, where they're going for that brown and gray and realistic look. So at least they did that, but the visuals themselves are just not impressive. And they're not bad either, but again, they're not impressive. Then you go to the sound design, which is kind of all over the place. The sound effects themselves work pretty well for the most part. There's nothing that's particularly out of place. The gun sounds are fairly decent. They seem a little bit generic in some places, but other than that, there's nothing particularly bad about them. Apart from the one sound that annoys the hell out of me, and that would be the sound that it makes when you get hit on the shields, which is just this really loud, obnoxious noise, and it plays it constantly because you're constantly taking hits in the shields, and you're constantly hitting other characters in the shields, so it's just going to drive you nuts the entire game. But other than that, the sound effects themselves do a pretty decent job. The music is just kind of generic action music, and nothing in it is particularly memorable, so there's not much to speak of there. It does what it needs to do, and that's about it. And the voice acting is the kind of black sheep of this thing. And what I mean by that is, while the rest of the sound design is just okay, the voice acting's pretty bad. It's really cheesy. It's all over the place. Certain characters sound really odd. Others sound just bored or something like that. And the entire time you listen to the voice acting, you're like, wow, this is ridiculous. As in, it's like watching a B-movie. The voice acting is just so cheesy all over the place, and it just kind of gets on your nerves after a while. So it's a weird situation where most of the sound design is fine, but the voice acting is just annoying, so just keep that in mind here. And the presentation overall is nothing particularly amazing, but it's not that bad either. But what really matters, the story and the gameplay, primarily the gameplay, because this is mostly a multiplayer game. But the story bears noteworthiness because it's so ridiculous. You play as a guy named Cord, who is a member of the 8th Armored Infantry, or as it's known among most of the soldiers, Section 8. Why is it known that? Because generally they do the things that no other sane soldier would do. They're the elites, basically. And the idea is that they drop in from orbit and go on Special Forces missions. And so Cord is rising through the ranks, and by the end of the campaign, which is only 8 missions long, he's a captain, and he starts out at the lowest rank possible. So, yeah, and the stuff in this game actually takes place basically within days of one another. So, it's a weird situation where he gets promoted every single mission. It's dumb. On top of that, the story itself is just absurd. You're fighting against this group called the Arm of Orion, which is a separatist group from apparently the United States Imperial Forces. I think it's just the U.S. Empire or something like that. I don't know. It's stupid. But suffice to say, it's in the future when colonies are all over the galaxy and the Arm of Orion is trying to break away, and it doesn't really explain much of anything there, why they're doing it, what the point of anything is. It's just suddenly warfare. And so the story itself ends up being incredibly stupid, and you don't really care about it. The characters themselves are not at all interesting, and they don't really have much personality as far as anything goes. So you end up not really caring about the storyline at all. And the campaign falls completely flat on its face, probably because this game is mostly designed for multiplayer. And when you're playing that in a single-player environment, then there's a serious problem, because they didn't change the single-player gameplay to match a single-player game. Instead, it's like playing a multiplayer game by yourself. It's an incredibly annoying experience where the game assumes you're going to be working as a team, and that's exactly how all of the stuff in this game is really configured. But the problem is that the bots in the single player are completely stupid and don't do anything that you really want them to do. They don't support you. They just kind of go off and do their own thing. They run around just going after enemy soldiers, and that's about it. And they don't usually go after the ones that are coming after you. So that's a pretty big problem. And it's painfully obvious that they tried to make this a tutorial for the multiplayer, but they failed miserably at it because, like I said, it's a multiplayer game and you're trying to do single-player campaign as your tutorial. It's not going to work out. So the campaign's just terrible. Don't bother with it. But what about the multiplayer? Well, I can't play the multiplayer. Nobody, I repeat, nobody plays this game online anymore. Which is a shame, because that means that I couldn't actually play the game online. So what did that mean? I had to go to the instant action mode, which is just multiplayer games against bots. So at least there's that option available. But suffice to say, it has full functionality of the multiplayer, only without other players required. So that's a very nice thing. It allows you to just go in and experience the multiplayer without actually having to go online and get your ass completely handed to you. And it would, I guarantee you. Why? Because this game isn't exactly easy to pick up. There's a lot of stuff you have to consider. There's suit modules that you have to put out for each individual class. You decide how you want to make your suit. Do you want better shielding? Do you want more stealth capability? Do you want more accuracy? That sort of thing. And so that's the decisions you have to make with the suit modules. That's part of the class creation. And you also have to pick out which weapons you want to use. There aren't that many of them, so it's not that crazy of a decision. There's a pistol, an assault rifle, a machine gun, a sniper rifle, shotgun, and a missile launcher. That's it. There's nothing else in this game. And so those weapons themselves each have their ups and downs. They have special effects that they do. Like, for instance, they have certain shield penetration capabilities, certain distances away that's the case. Some of them do higher damage than others. Like, the pistol does extremely high damage, but only at extremely close range. Likewise with the shotgun. It goes straight through your shield. It shreds them. And the machine gun doesn't do that much damage, but it has a fairly long range for it affects the shielding and such like that, so that's kind of nice. And each of them, of course, has their own properties like reload speed, what their accuracy is, of course, stuff like that. So there is some variety there, and you really do get to choose how you want to use your weapons and how you want to play that out. But suffice to say, Once you've selected all of your gear, your weapons, your suit modules, and of course your tools as well, whether you want to run around with a knife at all, because there is no melee attack in this game just right off the bat. You have to actually have in your inventory a knife. And the knife you have to switch to and then press the use gear key, and it's kind of dumb because there's almost no range to this thing at all, and to the point where it's kind of pointless to even have it, so that's kind of annoying. But anyway, but suffice to say, that's not really the main focus of this game. It just allows you to choose how you want to play it and how you can best support your team as they go to the objectives on the map. And the objectives are usually pretty simple. It's capture the points, that sort of thing, and it allows you to do all sorts of different things during that changes up this thing from the average FPS. And what I mean by that is not only do you have that pretty in-depth class system, and not only do you have the drop-in from orbit where you sort of select your spawn, where you drop in from orbit, and when you get a certain point you can hit the brakes, and that can actually allow you to control to some degree where you can actually land. And not only does it have that, but it also has a jetpack, which allows you, of course, to just go higher. The sprint mechanic is kind of weird. You can go into overdrive, and you go very, very quickly. But you can't use any weapons, and it takes you a while to charge that up, so that's kind of annoying. It takes a while to get used to, but it works out. But the nuances to the actual gameplay are what make it kind of interesting, where you get requisition points for doing various things throughout the game, of course, objectives, killing enemies, that sort of thing. And you get requisition points from all that can be used to buy various things, like supply drops, where you can drop in a supply depot wherever you want to on the battlefield. You can call in a tank, for instance, or you can call in heavy armor that you can get into and then just wreak havoc with, and stuff like that. So that adds a very dynamic feel to the gameplay, because you can literally drop these things wherever the terrain will allow it. So that's pretty cool. And that, coupled with the drop-in from orbit thing, makes, again, the gameplay very, very dynamic. But it's kind of weird. It takes a long time to get used to how this game actually plays. And once you're used to it, you realize that it's just kind of clustery. And what I mean by that is, there are certain points on the map where there will always be tons of players just battling it out, and the rest of the map is just empty space. And so it just kind of renders the maps pointless, the huge size of them annoying. And what I mean by that is, it takes you a very, very long time to go from one side of the map to the other. And particularly if you're just walking around. If you are normal sprinting, you go slightly faster. But if you're in overdrive, even then, it takes you quite a while. So they almost went too big on the maps. And even though you do get up to 32 players, even though the box actually says 40, but you can get up to 32 players in a server. And even then, there's quite a few sections of the map which are just not going to have anybody in them unless they're going from one side of the map to the other. So there's not a lot of good use of the map space. And the nuance of capturing points, where you have to actually hack a terminal and then it takes quite a while to actually go over to your side, is just kind of awkward. It takes a lot of getting used to, and that's the main problem I have with this game. It takes a lot of time to get used to for almost no reward. There's just slight issues with this game all over the place, and they all blend together to make it just not all that enjoyable. You can really see where they tried to make it a very different game, and in some cases that pans out okay, like the drop-in from orbit system, or the drop-in various things system. But it's other things, like the weapon balancing, for instance, seems kind of off, and such like that make the game just not all that enjoyable. And these are problems that they could very easily fix through, say, a sequel. And I know a lot of people play Section 8 Prejudice, which is the sequel to this game. But nobody plays this one anymore. And I have to wonder if that's because Section 8 Prejudice is just that much better. But I don't know, because I don't have it yet. But as far as the original Section 8 goes, it's an interesting concept, and it has a few good things about it. but by and large, it's a very underwhelming game. It's got these great concepts that you can see would be improved much in a sequel, but in this particular game, they don't work out exactly as expected, and that, coupled with games for Windows Live and such like that, renders this game not very recommended on my personal opinion. So, I give this a 2.5 out of 5. Thanks for watching.